Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Em.
And good morning, Andrew.
Morning.
Thank you for joining us on our Surfs Up podcast. The way that we like to start all of our podcasts is to have our guests introduce themselves. So Andrew is the CEO of the Queensland Major Contractors Association, the QMCA. Can you tell us explain your role as CEO at the QMCA and how your career journey has led you to where you are today?
Okay, thanks. Thanks for having me on. Well, that's interesting. As the CEO of the Queensland Major Contractors Association, or the QMCA, I'm responsible for being the face and of the organisation, which represents all the major engineering and construction contractors in the state. And part of my role is around advocacy on behalf of the industry. Part of my role is around coordinating the activities that the association does on behalf of industry. And we have a series of working groups that help drive some of these initiatives. I also organise help drive all our events with our events working group, and be active in trying to help promote the industry and make it a better place for the future. So as part of the initiatives that the QMCA has underway, we've got a series of working groups. As I alluded to before, we've got a technology and innovation working group, a sustainability working group, safety working group, industrial relations working group, a industry culture working group, a young construction professionals group, and an events working group. So I work very closely with all of those volunteers to help do a series of initiatives. And we do a whole heap of events throughout the year. And I guess that's what I do there. I also had my own business, ARC Strategic Solutions, and I work with a whole heap of engineering and construction companies around strategy, growth, product development, which is my sort of expertise area, I guess you could call it. How I got there, well, it's a long story. I started out my career on scholarship with Main Roads after uni.
Okay.
So at the end of second year, I applied for the Main Roads scholarship. I got it, and that paid my way through third and fourth year. I then started my career with Main Roads in 96, 97, and worked in Brisbane, worked in Toowoomba, all around the place. Left them in about 2000. Spent some time with Queensland Transport doing the Brisbane Light Rail project, which got canned. And then I left the government sector, and I have been in the private sector ever since, working for companies like Robert Bird Group, GHD, Seymour White, Tease, how long stint at Tease. And since the back end of 2017, I've had my own business, ARC Strategic, and I've worked for clients in Victoria, clients all around the place. And then I got asked to take this gig on. It's only part-time, about July 2020. So I've been there ever since.
How do you find the competing roles? Is it challenging in terms of allocation of time?
Oh, yeah, well and truly. The QMCA role is the bulk of my time. It takes up a lot of time, a lot of effort, but I enjoy it because I can see we're getting somewhere. The industry is certainly improving. We're becoming more proactive about a whole range of issues, and we're doing some really good stuff and helping the industry become a better place to attract people, a better place to retain people, and deliver value for money.
What type of initiatives does the QMCA take to advocate for the industry?
So we've done a whole heap of stuff in the past. A couple of years ago, we took on developing our own domestic violence policy and procedures for the industry. And we did that in consultation with Workhaven, an industry or company in the industry that does the domestic violence training and stuff. And we thought, let's do a consistent approach to understanding what DV is and how it might affect people and how we can start to deal with it. Not only the impacts, but trying to stop it before it happens. So we sat down with our members and went, well, if we're going to go down this path, what do we want to focus on? And there was a lot of thought around, we would like to be focusing on how do we help people who think they're perpetrating it. This is not just physical, there is the coercion side of it as well. And we developed up with Workhaven these policies, procedures, and everyone now, that got rolled out, everyone now has it and are using it with their workforces. So it's a consistent approach. Whether you work for Seymour White or BMD or whoever, it's a consistent approach to DV. Equally, we've been advocating for a whole range of improvements in the industry, particularly around industrial relations frameworks, procurement, how we can get more collaboration into the industry, particularly through the procurement phase and then into delivery, so that we're getting this better risk allocation. We can certainly give better surety around time and cost as well. So a whole heap of initiatives like that. So each working group is doing different things. The Technology and Innovation Working Group today, Technology Forum, May last year, and they're looking to follow that up again next year. We're going to look to do a Jobs and Skills Summit off the back end of the Queensland Major Projects Pipeline report that we do each year, next year as well. So a whole heap of different initiatives like that are a little bit different, but add value to the context of the industry.
That's as a side question, how many people are part of the QMCA? Are employed by it? That's a lot of work to repair.
There's Lorelei, who does all the admin and secretariat. We've got James, who does all our media and comms, and me.
Wow.
Oh, you're doing a fantastic job. So, well done.
It does get time consuming a fair bit, but it is, as I said before, it's enjoyable to be able to help the industry reshape itself and be proactive, be that voice or that body that government and private stakeholders want to come and talk to about how to get things done. So, for instance, the last couple of weeks I've had a private client come and speak to me and say, how do we engage with the industry around this project we want to go and do?
So can I ask, at what stage is that project? Is it inception in their brain, or is it?
It's through the planning. They've gone through the planning phase now, and they're looking to start. How do we start to procure? The other day I had one of the large councils talk to me about another project, which is probably still at least 18 months away. But how do we engage with industry to get the best outcomes here? So getting in early, I think, is really
it's vital.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled to hear that there's people coming at that stage, 18 months out from actually maybe pushing a major button to commence something, because that's when the culture or that's when the culture's almost set.
Well, I think it's really important too, given the cost increases we've seen in the industry and over the last couple of years. Like, we had hyper escalation through 2022 of running at 13 to 17% annual. It's just ridiculous. So when the earlier contractors are engaged with the engineers and the client and other the stakeholders to determine what is the real scope, what can be done, you're going to get greater cost certainty. You're going to get greater product delivery certainty. And I think that's critical for financiers. It's critical for clients. And it's critical to be able to explain to the community too what you want to achieve when. Rather than, oh, look, we're going to do this project and the cost keeps going and going. And I think we've got to come back to giving better cost and price certainty. And that comes down to, in my view, collaboration up front.
Yeah, could be more.
When the private client comes to you, what kind of guidance or assistance how do you engage with them to help them engage with industry?
Yeah, I sort of say to them, well, what do you want to achieve? What are you looking to do? Because if it's just an information fest, then that's a little bit different. But if you're actually wanting to get feedback from industry, we're happy to get some people in the room, or I'm happy to facilitate the certain people. Like, for instance, certain projects won't fit every member of the QMCA. Now, if it's a road project, then yes, it's going to fit most. But if it's a heavy industry project, it will fit certain ones. So it's getting those companies involved to help provide feedback, or the QMCA can provide direct feedback on behalf of industry early on without bothering in great detail a lot of the contractors who are in the middle of either tendering or doing other stuff too.
Interesting. So as part, you've brought along hard copies, which I love, of the QMCA's report, which we'll hyperlink when we post our episode online, titled Unshackling Queensland's Infrastructure Potential. And I think as part of our video, we'll have to put some of these graphs on, edit them on the screen. But can you just sort of, first, before we delve into it, summarise what the purpose of this report was and the main themes?
Okay. Thanks, Emily. We put this together as an election issues paper because we felt that the election we've just had, it was critical to be able to outline our view of what is holding back the industry. We have seen project blowouts. We have seen time increases on projects, and the industry getting criticised a fair bit. That's just this or that. And we wanted to really highlight the issues that are affecting the industry. And from our perspective, there's a whole heap of them, but to really nut it down to two bits, we've got a massive pipeline of work that is uncoordinated. It's uncoordinated in terms of across different portfolios. The Queensland government's got this big build program. We're doing 11 hospitals all at the same time. I'm a bush economist, and even I know what happens when you do that from a supply and demand perspective. It forces costs up artificially. So our view is we need to sequence this stuff better. And then we've got a whole heap of policy settings that are affecting productivity. Now, when I talk about productivity, I'm talking about our effective working days. It's what we're able to achieve as an output per your input. And I've always looked at productivity. You can do it a whole heap of different measures. ABS do one that is exceptionally complex, and I swear you need to be an economist to understand it.
That's my edit.
Yeah, I just don't get it. However, the trend in that shows very clearly that against other industries, be it transport, be it manufacturing, be it food and beverage or whatever, the construction industry has gone backwards since 1990, whereas every other industry has improved. Now, we did have an improvement, funnily enough, between 2010 and 15, when we did the big resources and energy boom across the country in WA and in Queensland, and we've lost all of that. And we're actually lower on a comparative productivity level today to where we were in 1990. That's a pretty poor outcome. Now, when you look at that from a Queensland context, it becomes even worse. So I've broken productivity down to the amount of work you've delivered per the number of people you've had employed in the sector. I think that's the simplest way of looking at it.
It's old-fashioned.
Very old-fashioned, but it's
simple. It talks to me.
Simple, Excel, and I like that.
And where do you get that data?
So we get that data from our major projects pipeline report. We get that data from Construction Skills Queensland, from the federal government in terms of the amount of work that's been done, AES and the like. And what it shows is that between 2011 and 15, we delivered a huge amount of work with less than half of the people we've got today. So then you map that productivity compared to today, and we are sitting at under 50% of what we were between 2011 and 15. It's a pretty stark outcome. Now, granted, it's a different type of work. When we delivered all that work in Queensland, 2011 to 15, a lot of it was modularised, a lot of it was automated. We did for the LNG plants. It was modularised overseas, was brought in on barges. It was hooked together. There's still a lot of workers on site. Fast forward today, it's not that kind of work. It's a lot of road work. But even in our building side of things, we've gone backwards, in my view. If we're doing all this hospital work, why can't the wards be moduled?
We were talking about this.
Pre-laid and put together. that just says to me we've missed a golden opportunity. And that changes the productivity dial. It doesn't mean we're going to employ less people. It means we're going to be employing them differently. And we're going to be value adding on our construction sites. And the other thing that is holding industry back is all these procedures and over-the-top approvals and requirements that have lifted what we call our indirects. So 10 years ago, indirects on a construction site accounted to 25% of your overall value of the job. Today, they're running 45%.
What's your example of indirects?
So that would be all your administration, environmental compliance, community compliance, all this kind of stuff. Now, that can be done more succinctly, in our view, and more efficiently. There is far too much prescriptive nature around this. You must have this number of people. Well, we don't need them full-time.
What happens
in share them across projects?
Yeah.
So there's a lot more of this approvals, requirements that are driving unproductive costs into the industry. And it's particularly on the government projects, and then it seeps across the others as well. And then, there's a lot of compliance costs with things such as best practice industrial conditions, ethical supplier mandate, by Queensland audits, that just add cost to projects for what outcome? And you'd have to question the value of those things. So what we've tried to do in this is highlight those issues and say, what are the paths forward that we can do? And look, there's some real, that productivity graph in there really lays it out, and the impact of BPIC, which is effectively just a CFMEU patent agreement that was given to the state government and they created across. But what it does do is it really reinforces the fact that if we don't fix some of these policy settings and we don't start to get a much more coordinated pipeline across the state government spend, we run the very real risk of not being able to deliver the infrastructure that the state needs for health, for energy, for water, for transport, and critically, for the 2032 games. We run a very, very real risk of that at the moment because of where productivity is. So, for instance, on the Kangaroo Point Green Bridge, that was a Brisbane City Council job, between where they started and where they finished, they achieved only 60% effective working days. So 60% productivity on that project compared to where they had originally planned. It was 57% over the original budget and 1 year late. And it was a CFMEU patent agreement site, which is exactly the same as what BPIC is. So we had massive number of traffic controllers, which you didn't need. Could have been much simpler. So we need to be looking at how we're working more efficiently and effectively and safely to deliver productivity. And that's what we're really trying to highlight in this. Now, we've got an uncoordinated pipeline. We've got a volatile industrial relations environment at the moment, which is then stoked by changes from the state that is diminishing our productivity, and we're getting higher input costs, and that's affecting everybody. So when we talk about higher import and output, higher import costs, which means things cost more, we deliver, for the finite budget that we have, we deliver less roads, we deliver less rail, we deliver less water infrastructure, or your energy costs more, your water costs more, thanks to these issues. And we're actually finalising a BPIC impacts paper at the moment, which we will hand to the Productivity Commission when it gets up and running, when it does its review of building construction industry around the impact of BPIC. And we're really starting to see some of those curves now, which are just mind-boggling.
If I bring it back just to the coordination issue of the pipeline of work, how do you suggest that how's that going to be resolved? Is that all the major contractors and the government sitting down in a room and figuring out what they can all do together?
Look, because a lot of these are contractually nailed down.
Yeah, they are. And what we would like to see is the central agency, such as state development, taking a more active role around this with Treasury and saying, okay, given that this is their capital spend budget, what's our prioritisation? Where's our priorities? And then starting to lay that out better. Why are we doing hospitals is a great example. Why are you doing 11 hospitals all at the same time? Just ridiculous. You can do one, or you could have 3 running or 4 running at the same time, but yep, that contractor, the learnings from that one to go into the next one, to the next one. So 1, economies of scale. 2, better output. 3, we're lessening that massive peak on industry. So the analysis we've had done indicates that the trades that are available in Queensland at the moment get completely soaked up just with the hospital program. Yet we've got energy, water, housing, and a whole heap of other infrastructure that needs to be done as well at the same time. So we've got to balance those things. Yes, we want industry's capability and capacity to grow, but you can't just, it's not like buying a widget off the shelf. These are individual capabilities that take time to build.
Yeah, I haven't had time to go in it, but I heard this morning as I was getting ready to come down here, Western Australia's offering some inducement for the trades to go over there in terms of, significant, come over and we'll give you $10,000 or $15,000 as, resettlement costs and things like that. So that's the other thing that you're going to see going forward is almost the industry cannibalising itself.
It has already been cannibalising itself for some time. So when we finished that big energy and resources boom in Queensland in 2015-16, we went into quite a hole. And what happened was Victoria and New South Wales started to pick up in their infrastructure spend. So we had project managers, tradespeople, whatever, started to either move or going down. So the Qantas Lounge, the Virgin Lounge, on a Sunday and a Monday morning, we're just chockers full of professionals heading south.
The railway crossing thing.
Yeah, the railway crossings, the rail upgrades, the motor road projects, Victoria, all the stuff that they were doing with Sydney Metro and other projects in New South Wales. Yeah, they went through a massive infrastructure boom. Now, we thought they might start to tail off as Queensland starts to come out, particularly with the 32 games coming and the infrastructure that's needed. That hasn't happened. We gone, and they've now gone again. So we already have a massive competition for skilled, unskilled labour across the east coast of Australia. And then as WA is starting to sort of pick up again, we're now getting that across the west as well. So we do not have enough skilled resources in the country. We need to improve that. We do not have enough professional resources in the country. I was looking at some statistics the other day. Here's a precursor for the main. In Queensland, we have 4,000 people going into doing an engineering course each year. About that number. We're only graduating 55 years out of us.
Yeah, I was looking at
so we, at 1 in 2, it's poor outcome. We need to do better.
Bill Skills Australia sort of stuff report the other day, and went into this horrible. Let's not delude ourselves with commencement. It's
the commencement.
What comes out the other side,
and it's the trades as well. I was starting to see some stuff on trainees and apprenticeship completion.
Yes,
we've got huge number going in to do and apprenticeships and traineeships. They're not completing it, so we need to find a way of helping them through to complete it. Because if we don't, we're not going to have the people to be able to build the homes. We're not going to have the people to be able to build the hospitals, the infrastructure we need for the Olympics, the water assets we need, the transport, and other stuff as well.
It comes together with a perfect storm because a lot of those challenges are in occupations where you've got an aging current age, average in terms of the people that are actually doing the work at the moment. So you're getting less coming in at the commencement, and you're getting
and there's more coming
at the back end. So you just Bush and economists, I like that term, tells me that unless the situation is addressed, it's going to get worse.
That's correct, and it has that supply and demand impact as well.
Yeah.
So that I think that there's a role, getting back to the coordination, there is an extremely important role for state development to play in this, because we put it to them sometime, a couple of years ago. Where's the coordination? Oh, no, Treasury sort of does it. No, Treasury looks at the numbers and says, can I afford that? They don't do any coordination. That's the central agency's role. And I think, I hope, under this new government, that we will have much more rigour around that rather than just collating stuff and here's your pipeline. Oh, blind Freddie can do that.
One of the challenges, I think, for this new government, as I was looking at the ministerial portfolio the other day, is that you've got an Olympics minister, Tim Mander, but as well as you've got the other. So there's going to have to be good coordination at that level, to ensure that there's not any sort of, just so that we're all on the same page.
Well, I think it's important that the infrastructure minister, and that's Jared, takes hold of that coordination element rather than just being a post box for pulling stuff together. I mean, and that's where state development has been. It's been, we're just sort of policy people, and you're not. You're supposed to be the coordinators. You're the central agency for infrastructure and planning. Be it.
Because none of what we've talked about so far has addressed anything to do with, because the Olympics bum fight, quite frankly. All that's got to be costed and contracted and done. So the pressures we're talking about now we haven't even thrown it in the Olympics.
No, yes. I mean, some of the stuff the Olympics they have started procurement on, and let's be honest, they're glorified portal frame buildings. Yeah. They're big, they're community facilities that are legacy, which is fantastic. They've got going on the low-hanging fruit.
But we talk about the big stuff.
You've got the big stuff, right? Yeah, stadium, arena, and a few other things. And I'm glad you brought up the Olympics, because the Olympics was bid on the basis of us getting generational transport infrastructure out of this region for 30 years.
It's going to be the legacy.
That was the legacy. That was how it was sold. And then the regions will get community infrastructure for sporting facilities, bit swimming pools, bit change rooms for local clubs, bit enhanced facilities for communities, etc. We suddenly got into this argument about, we're going to put it at the Gabba because it's beside something else, right? Seriously, we need, and then the regions, some of the regions are going, particularly North Queensland, we don't want the Olympics because it's all the money gets trained to Brisbane. When the Olympics come, what it's going to do is it means instead of Sydney being the gateway to Brisbane, the gateway to Australia, Brisbane's going to be a massive gateway. And then they're going to go up into North Queensland.
Into the region.
So the secondary and tertiary benefits of having the games will flow for 30 or 40 years. But we need to get this infrastructure, be it social and economic, planned and delivered now so that we can capitalise on it.
Particularly South East Queensland will see what transport legacy is left from the Olympics.
Think about Sydney. Sydney got Airport Rail Line, that's part of it. It got a whole heap of rail upgrades. It got the Eastern Distributor.
Yeah.
They were all part of that plan. And then it got City Olympic Park came along. And interestingly, the stadium and the swimming facility were done with private money. They were done under a form of PPP model, which then got transferred to the state after 10 years. Why can't we do that here? Perth Stadium is privately funded.
Is that whole thing privately funded?
Yeah.
Wow.
So there are opportunities to do that. Yet under the previous government, it was just a blanket no on anything to do with the private sector. And it's like, come on. If you've only got a finite amount of public money, let's see how we can use private money to enhance that and then reallocate that public money into doing other things that enhance the value.
Have the capacity to buy it back after 10 years or claim it back or get it back after 10 years sort of satisfies both sides of that concern about it should get to public ownership at some point of time, but give them 10 years of use of it to
commercialise it. And they can look at different models around that. Now, there's a huge argument at the moment, whether it's this side or that side or whatever. I don't want to get into that today because it could take up hours. But my view is that it needs to be close to good transport linkages. It needs to be close enough to the city that becomes walkable as well. Like you think about Marvel Stadium, MCG in Sydney, Melbourne, and the tennis centre. They're all walkable.
Everybody walks to that.
And you've got train, tram, bus there as well. Whereas here, you think about it, busway, metro, rail, it needs to be within that inner city area.
I live at Kelvin Grove, so Victoria Park is...
It makes a logical sense in my regard. I thought
in my 30 years ago. I don't know why it's not. It's to me,
it's personally hope it's there, but I think it's up to us to go through this process now to come up with the right solution that everyone can be happy with.
Yeah.
Gabba, great location, not big enough.
No.
And I'll leave it as that. We need to detonate enough 2 city blocks to make that work.
So to be able to do that productively and affordably, there are some industrial relations issues here to be out. Can you expand on those further?
So the previous state government brought in a little thing called best practice industrial conditions. It certainly wasn't best practice, and it certainly wasn't industrial conditions. It was a CFMU patent program. And they forced it on industry and said, you must take this on or show how you're going to take elements of this on to deliver projects over 100 million. It started off on Townsville Study, added an extra 48 million to that project. It went on Cairns Convention Centre. It went on Gatton Correctional Facility. It's now on all the hospital stuff. It's been supposedly on projects over 100 million. It's been on schools at 20 million in value. It has a series of dictated wage rates in it, and they're included in this document. It's now been rolled out across the civil sector. It's into renewables. And what we're seeing is wage rates going from, for say, a CW3 in 2020 from about 135,000 a year to 270,000 a year in 2027, with less productivity. So there's a whole heap of dictated wage rates in there, but there's also these very poor conditions that drive down productivity. So we've got this double whammy impact. And some of those are hot weather when it's 28 degrees or 75% humidity, or work on site stops. Regardless of what you're doing, or regardless of what hot weather policy you have.
28 degrees.
Yeah, I think it's 28, 29, one of the two. Then there's, if it's over 34, no work whatsoever. If there's lightning within 100k, work stops, regardless of which direction. We've got the hour-long pre-start every morning that is run by the union. We've got a 2 hours per week for union activity, which they have used to grab people off sites and take them to go and do protests. We have the 2 hour safety meeting that can be called at 5 minutes notice, 5 days a week. And that has been used regularly to cause trouble over other agenda issues. So on Kangaroo Point Greenbridge, the union called it in the middle of concrete ball over safety because they were annoyed at the contractor trying to reduce the number of traffic controllers they had on site because they didn't need them. So they're bending the contractor over. Then we have the union has control of who the subcontractors are on site. So funnily enough, they only get sign off on those that have a patent agreement with the
Explainers team on the way down.
Yeah, it's appalling. It is, and I would argue that it's actually anti-competitive behaviour that the ACCC needs to have a damn good look at under the Competition Act in this country. And there's a whole heap of other conditions in there that affect their ability to be productive. So when you start adding those up, you can see that our productivity starts dropping away very, very quickly. Now, it bore out of this thing called the best practice principles. And the best practice principles are principles around the way or the outcomes that the government wanted to see come out of their investment into infrastructure and construction. And that was things like Indigenous employment, greater local business engagement, more women into the industry, et cetera, et cetera. And we were, as an industry, we are 100% aligned on those. But let's not then put something exceptionally prescriptive in to tell you how to do it. Let's leave the opportunity for industry to flex and whine to then deliver on those principles as part of the contractual obligations, rather than say, here you go, here's something unproductive, you go and model it, you go and work to that. And we've done a whole heap of analysis around what the impact of that, taking on that BPIC as a project agreement on the sites are. And we lose at least 30% productivity.
So would QMCA propose to remove BPIC altogether or strip it substantially back?
So in our document, we've actually said, get rid of BPIC. We do not need it. We have never needed it. In fact, we were at a briefing at the back end of 2021 I remember this clear as day, with Public Works. And there was a Deputy Director General standing at the front trying to explain BPIC. And somebody from the audience said, can you explain, it wasn't me, can you explain what was so broken with the industry that we needed this level of intervention with BPIC? And she said, wage theft. You're all wage thieves. I've never seen a room explode the way it did. And there was small subcontractors standing up going, you call me a wage thief? And now that is the wording directly out of the CFMEU handbook. Wage theft is abhorrent. Unfortunately, it happens in certain industries. It does not happen a lot in construction. We are well down the list. I'm not saying that, we are clean. The industry does need to clean up those rogue operators and get them out, but they are very few and far between. It is far more prevalent in retail. It is far more prevalent in other industries.
Yeah.
And yet we've got tainted with being somehow wage thieves. And that's why we needed this level of intervention. It's ridiculous. It has no basis to it. So we have said, get rid of BPIC. We can work with the government around best practice principles to achieve the outcomes thereafter without the prescriptive element that is BPIC. And the challenge will be how we, as an industry, deal with some of these legacy projects that have elements of BPIC on them already. I don't think BPIC's going to be switched off overnight. Geez, I'd love it to be, but I'm a realist. The new government has said that they're going to set up re-establish the Productivity Commission. Their first port of call will be to look at the building and construction industry.
Regulation.
And the regulation and a whole heap of stuff that is affecting productivity. So in our sector, so we will be providing submissions to them around that and saying that we're happy to work with third parties and stakeholders to achieve safe, productive outcomes. BPIC does not do that. It does not deliver any great safety increases. It does not deliver any productivity increases. It makes projects more expensive, take longer, and deliver less value.
What I find interesting is I've noticed suddenly Master Electricians Australia came out the other day and was very strong in terms of how it pushes down and impacts on the subcontractors. So it's not as if you're in, it's almost a coming together of a broad coalition of parties who have got an interest in this. They might be more nuanced in certain respects, but it's everyone's almost screaming at the same thing. This has to be either stripped back or is significantly reviewed, because it affects not just head contractors. If you're talking about first, Sparky's wanting to, just cut off the requirement that they've got to be EBA.
Yeah.
Well, then you've got this broad coalition.
So there's two parts to that. The first is that BPIC was, the way it's written, is that you have to pass that down through your entire supply chain. Now, that your suppliers and your subcontractors. So an asphalt subby had a look at what it meant to their business. It would be a 90% increase in cost. So that then gets passed on to the head contractor, who passes that on to the client. And where does that money come from? Oh, that's the taxpayer. And suddenly, if you're lifting here and you say the state project component might only be 40% of your revenue. You got a whole heap of councils. Their costs now lifted too. So the ratepayers are paying more. So everyone's being hit with this double whammy. And then it's the subbies. Now, I know a very, very good HVAC contractor, subby in Queensland, who has made a conscious decision not to be involved in a health build because they do not want to expose their entire business to this issue. Yeah, they have repivoted and they're doing far more overseas, far more interstate. Yeah, so we've kind of lost that capability. It's going elsewhere
At the time we need it.
when we need it more. So it's having this impact, and particularly in the electrical sector, where the ETU have now gone and struck an agreement with Energy Queensland that says for every contestable bit of electrical work in the market, and that is everything in front of the meter, whether it's done privately or publicly, any contractor or subcontractor must comply with their EBO with Energy Queensland. Their rates are higher than what is in the renewable BPIC, and it gives the ETU complete control. Now, that will hit everyone at your meter, i.e. your power bill will go up substantially thanks to that, which is another form of BPIC. So we need to reform industrial relations. We need to get it back. It has shifted far too much over this side. It needs to come back to being relevant in the middle. We're not saying we get rid of unions. Unions have an important role to play in the workplace, but we need to do it in a balanced way that achieves safe, productive outcomes and not be prescripted about how we do things. We need to allow industry to work out whether, and their workforce, work out whether they want to do a non-union or a union agreement, instead of not being dictated to, and particularly about which union you have to work with. So there are a whole heap of stuff around the IR side of it. There's the, years ago we used to have this a body under workplace health and safety and the IR who had was a bit like Queensland's version of the ABCC, who had enforcement powers around making sure everyone was compliant, employers and employees, and the representatives around the Queensland Construction Code.
Michael and I were talking. You've led me straight into our next question.
Okay.
Keep going.
So we used to have that, and we're saying bring some form of that back, because we need to make sure everyone is complying. And I'm not pointing the finger at any one party, but every party needs to comply. And we've also got psychosocial hazards and legislation is now in place. And what that is it's mental health. And we have raised this issue with the government, the previous government, that 99% of the psychosocial hazards and outcomes from it that have resulted on sites have been due to third parties. So how do you think somebody would feel when they're threatened? It's a psychosocial hazard. So what we're trying to say is those that have perpetrated those or have conducted those kind of activities and behaviours, they pose a psychosocial hazard or risk and will and should not be permitted on site. But the problem is that the legislation still enables those people to come on site. So there was a project down the Gold Coast here on the M1 where a CFME rep threatened to go to his cart and swing a baseball bat around. And the project manager said to him, "Are you threatening me?" "No, I'm just going to swing my baseball bat around in the car park." "We're in the car park. Are you threatening that?" So those kind of people and those behaviours should not happen. They should never happen in any civilised society. If you can't have a civilised debate and discussion, then, off you go. Equally, I'm aware of a project in Brisbane where on a building project where the client's project manager was threatened by an industrial rep if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to tie you up and throw you in the Brisbane River. To me, that's a death threat.
Not with your mental health.
No. So we need to remove, and look, there have been instances of people coming on site and urinating on the floor and saying, you've got a drainage issue here. It's good. So where in the world is that acceptable?
One of my observations about, and we spoke about it earlier, about off-site manufacturing, everything, that changes the whole dynamic about, there's also other flow on, if I can call them, we'll call them benefits. Because it's manufacturing, it's a safer environment for starters, but it's also a different access entitlement for you, quite frankly, certain unions.
It's not only just that. Like I worked on a modular project overseas. When I was at Serco, I was asked to look at this idea of, can you do modular prison cells? So I took it from an idea through planning, design, fabrication, commissioning, brought it back here, etc. So I'm well versed with modular prefab solutions. And yes, you've got a much it's a different environment because you're doing replicability. Yeah. And look, the factory we were having stuff done in, there was one part where they were doing 2,000 student accommodation modules. Yeah. All in a row. And you would have, the plumbing guys, from one to the next. Then you had your electrical guys coming in all the way through. It's fascinating stuff. I think there's great opportunities for that. We can get high quality when you're doing it in a manufacturing setting rather than on site with safer. But it doesn't mean that we're going to be employing less. We could do more work then because we're employing them in different areas. Equally, I think automation and digital technologies provide a really good avenue to improve productivity. And the industry has been a laggard for so long. We need to improve that. Automation.
Diversity, it opens up diversity opportunities for because you're actually creating a new type of workforce. So why wouldn't, females want to be part of that?
Or even people with a disability or different divergent backgrounds.
Yes, it could open up all sorts of new opportunities, Indigenous opportunities, all sorts of opportunities just through, reframing the way in which we construct and take a lot of the stuff from on-site and take it to off-site.
Yeah, but equally comes back to that collaboration. Yeah, if you've got collaboration, proper collaborative procurement, where you choose your contractor early and they work with the engineers, work with the client and other stakeholders to determine what level of innovation, what level of creativity, what level of modularisation, automation, if the technology can be brought into it to deliver safe, productive outcomes at the back end, you can start to go, hey, we can do this a little bit differently, and you embed it. But if you have just going down the age-old standard procurement process where it's designed, it's handed over to the contractor, and you're given 4 to 8 weeks to tender on it. By the way, you can't rely on any of the information I've given you that I spent 4 years to develop it. Where do you think the contracting industry goes? It goes back to what we've always done in the past and says, here we are. And we don't move one iota. That's why we're not moving productivity in a big way. It's because we're not getting collaborative procurement up front. And then we've got these industrial relations frameworks that don't enable an improvement in productivity at the back end as well. So, I'm a big believer in modularisation. I'm a big believer in automation. Our technology and innovation group are doing a paper on what is the path to automation in the civil sector. I worked in Tees where our mining business was doing automated truck movements on mining sites. That's been in place for a decade or more. Why can't we be doing it on civil construction jobs? I'm not saying every single one, but let's start on particularly the greenfield ones. Like you think about Sunshine Coast Direct Rail, there's a massive greenfield corridor. Why can't the earth moving equipment fleet be running autonomous? They could be running 24 hours a day. It could be battery electric. We can do these innovative things if we had proper collaboration up front.
Holy dooly. Well, there's a lot of information from this report. And there's another one coming out next week. Any hints to keeping it very tight-lipped because it comes out at the events that QMCA are running around Queensland. Any particular topics that you're focusing on?
Well, I'll give you the background. So each year we do the QMCA does the Queensland Major Projects Pipeline Report. Now, what that report is it gets all the projects that are normally over 50 million in value, but probably greater granularity over 100 million in value that are engineering and construction jobs. So it doesn't pick up the health, it doesn't pick up facilities, say for the Olympics, and probably the stadium it will eventually. But what it's doing is, it's roads, rail, marine, defence, water and wastewater, energy, so electricity particularly, pumped hydros, solar, wind. Then we've got heavy industry and resources. And what it does is it tries to lay out those projects. We do it each year. When I was first involved in it in 2020, the 5-year pipeline sat at 48 billion. Last year, it was 92 billion. I'll give you a tip. It's over 100 billion this year for a 5-year pipeline. Now, that's a huge growth. It's really interesting to see the change in that work breakdown, though. So back in 2020, it was a lot in the transport space. The transport has increased, but the massive volume of work coming forward is in the electricity space without energy transition, as you would expect. Now, that includes, pumped hydros. It includes transmission. Like, we've got it to build 2,500 kilometres of high voltage transmission lines in 10 years. How much have we built in the last 10 years?
I have no idea.
80K, about that. So there's a lot of work to happen here. The towers that we get for the transmission line have all come from India in the past. So we've got to be looking at how we upskill industry to be able to deliver here locally. We will still get stuff from overseas, there is no doubt. But we've got to be looking at how we upskill as part of that. And that's probably one of our big messages in the pipeline report. How do we grow capability in industry? How do we improve productivity? What I've said before about automation, modularisation, technology plays a big role. But we've also got to improve our productivity on site when we deliver. And that comes down to a whole heap of other settings, including industrial relations. I think some of the big stuff we've done this year, we've looked at what is the deliverability of the pipeline. And in the past, we've gone, we got this massive increase each year. It's going to get up to the numbers that we saw back in 2012 to 15 again. And yes, it will. The funded pipeline itself is huge. Now, last year we were showing that over the 5-year forward years, the funded pipeline alone was going to be 10.5 to 12 billion a year. Where were we in terms of delivery? We're only delivering 8 to 8.5. So it's already a step up. Now, this year is showing similar kind of numbers. But what we've looked at is when we said, we look forward a year ahead and we said, it was going to be 9 billion. How much did we deliver of that 9 billion? It's quite interesting numbers. And it's really, I won't give that away too much other than saying that it is concerning that we haven't been able to lift capacity to deliver over the last couple of years. I think that there's a lot of latent capacity there. Things like the federal government's review of their investment into infrastructure, which they announced in May last year. Then gave their answers in November.
Was that the Catherine King?
Yeah, it was nothing more than economic sabotage. And I'll call it that because that's what it did and has done. The long-term particularly the medium-term ramifications of that are still flowing through. We weren't able to deliver what was in front of us because industries went pulling back. We had engineers laying people off. when we've got all this amount of work coming forward.
It took us time, that review too, didn't it?
It took way too long. And then they changed the funding arrangements overnight. And so then your councils and your state governments had to then work out, well, what does this mean? So it's affected their budgets. When the federal government takes 81% of all taxation in the country and then is not investing in economic infrastructure, you've got to wonder what the hell they're doing. So that has had a massive impact on deliverability of the pipeline. We've then looked at the breakdown of the project size, and it's quite interesting that we've seen this continual growth of the mega project, projects over $1 billion in value, to the detriment of the projects under 100, particularly under 50. And if we're looking for our next BMD or our next Seymour White, they come from the companies that are doing $50 million jobs a day. So we need to make sure that we've got a sustainable, healthy industry across all levels. And we need to, if we want those companies to grow and be part of a $100 million job or a $200 million job, we need to make it available such that they can, and their risk profile and their appetite can be managed. I was at Seymour White when the Origin Alliance came up, which was an idea developed by Mango Murphy in Main Roads, who happened to be my first ever boss when I was out of uni. The idea was grab a tier 1 contractor, grab 2 tier 2 contractors, and grab 2 designers, put them all together and in an alliance to deliver a project. That was the precursor for Seymour White to be the company that it is today. Because it enabled them to come on board and be able to not be involved. It was involved in a $1.2 billion project at the time, which is back 2007, that they would never be part of under an organic type of growth structure. We need to be looking at that more and more if we want our tier 2s and tier 3s to be able to lift and build capability.
A left field question. I've only seen the headline, but is there an issue with defence? Because I know Robertson Co have pulled out of doing any defence contracting at all. Now I know they're not Queensland based, I think they're in New South Wales and Victoria based at the moment. And I need to dig into the headline, but they've said no more defence work for us.
Defence is a very challenging and long and convoluted process to be able to get a lot of work. Yes, there's a lot of work there, but it's a very challenging process for somebody to walk in and pick up a job straight away. So for Robertson Co, might have been used to doing wholly but residential or commercial type building where you can deal directly with the client. I did this one in the past. Defence, have you done this kind of subcontract work before? And they step you in slowly. And Defence's managing contractor model is very different to a lot of others, particularly public works, which I say should not exist. It needs to be rebuilt completely. It's not collaborative. But the MC model that they have is very, very different. And people go, yeah, there's a lot of money in defence, but it's a challenging model to do. The time frames for doing stuff. If we think state governments are bad, oh my God, wait till you work in defence sometimes. And as people who have worked in defence say, you need a lot of patience. You also need to be able to deal with the defence hierarchy and deal with them.
And the political roundabout and swings and misses and how things can pivot.
Now, there's a lot of contractors who are banned from being in the defence space because they are owned by overseas entities. So,
and that's right.
Yeah, prohibited. So, for instance, John Hollands, you don't work in defence.
Truly?
Yeah, and they're owned by the Chinese. I know of others who are, other contractors who might be internationally owned and they're prohibited. So there is a smaller market of people who can do defence work, but you need to have some good experience in that space, or good connections, and be able to be prepared. It is a long game, and stepping into it bit by bit by bit, unfortunately. Lend-Lease have been there for a long time. Langarook have been there for a long time. Others have, because they've taken.
I just saw this headline the other day, and
it didn't surprise me, because if you go, hey, there's a lot of money in defence, we'll go into defence. It's not as simple. And rightly so. They have a lot of checks and balances they need to do, because you are working on very sophisticated things. And it's not just coming in and building a hangar. There's a whole heap of issues that come with that. Seafarity stuff.
Well,
and that's the layman's view.
That's all I wanted.
That's all we want. I think we could do a 10-part interview with you, but it's already been an hour. So we usually close off our interviews by asking our guests, you have a lot on your plate with QMCA and your own business. What do you do for yourself to de-stress and take the load off and make sure that you're looking after yourself so that you can show up as your best self to work each day?
Good question. I don't think I've done enough of that. However, I do try to run my dogs every morning as much as I can. So I got up at 5 this morning, get my son off to rugby training, and I took the dogs for a 5K jog. That's what I try to do every day. See, I've tried to start reducing the size of this. I've got onto the man shake over recent times because I realised I've got to do something. As you approach 50, regardless of how much exercise you do, it just keeps hacking on the race line. It's like, what the hell going on here? And I've been running all my life. So, I try to do that. And that's the way I kind of de-stress a bit. I've got a wife and 2 kids, 2 dogs, and where I live is a bit of a sanctuary. Plenty of space, which is great. Helps de-stress a bit. The last couple of years have been interesting and challenging. 2 years ago, my daughter got diagnosed with cancer. So she went through chemo. My wife was in hospital with her a fair bit, pretty much when she was in for chemo. And I go up and back and try to manage the house as best I could, get James off to school and the like. So that was challenging. She's now in remission, nearly 2 years in remission. And then started last year, my wife had a stroke. So she's all recovered, but those things add to your stress. And I think my wife carried a hell of a lot more stress than I did, particularly over our daughter, because she was with her the entire time. So I think you're right, you do need to take time. I've never been great with taking excess time off. I like working. I like contributing. But I think it's really important for anyone to take time off, whether that is just sitting there and relaxing or getting away and decompressing or whatever they call it. It's important. And then having good friends around you to be able to chinwag. I think that's really important as well. Because your mental health is as important as your physical health. Because if you can't be right in the right mental space, you can't deliver.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well, thank you for joining us, Andrew.
No problem.
And looking forward to releasing the episode, which by the time it comes out, the major report will be out, so we can link it and everyone can...
Well, I can tell you this, if it's coming out after, it's nearly 104 billion in 5 years.
Yeah, no, we'll probably be after, so we're not going to take any.
Yeah.
104 billion, and that's essentially for projects above $100 million.
Yeah, Greater Glamia are above 100, but we do pick up projects over 50. Yes.
And we're still no major Olympic funded.
There's no real Olympic transport infrastructure in there.
Which has got to be punted into 5 years.
Exactly. And then you've got the stadium, the arena and stuff like that, which I would classify as major infrastructure, which is not included in that either.
Yeah. So we'll leave it with that little nugget. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Andrew. It was great. I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. The information we discussed today was just that, information only. It is not specific advice. If you take action following something you heard today, it is important to make sure you get professional advice about your unique situation before you proceed, whether that advice be legal, financial, accounting, medical or other advice. Please reach out to the Helix team if you have any questions or if there's another topic you'd like to explore. And if you know someone who might benefit from the show, remember to tell them about it or point them to our Instagram, Facebook or LinkedIn